Hello, and welcome to today's video. Today, I want to tell you about something I think I was wrong about. So today, we're going to be talking about Saccharomyces boulardii, why I thought it was the worst probiotic. I thought that Saccharomyces boulardii sucked. I really thought it was one of the worst probiotics that you could take. I now have some evidence that I might have been wrong, and I might have jumped to some conclusions, and I want to just present that to you so that you can know that I actually do now think Saccharomyces boulardii is a good probiotic and it has a place. This doesn't mean that my previous points about Saccharomyces boulardii are wrong, but it means that there is more to this situation than I realized. So let's get started. My original argument for why I thought Saccharomyces boulardii kind of sucked as a probiotic is that it doesn't colonize. So as soon as you stop taking it, you're going to stop getting the benefits. It's one of these probiotics that doesn't inhabit the gut microbiome for an extended period of time. It's kind of like a temporary resident. It sees your gut like a hotel. It comes and lives there for a little bit and then it leaves. So this would kind of fit into the same sort of category as the soil-based organisms like Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus clausii, Bacillus coagulans, these other spore-based probiotics, these being bacteria and Saccharomyces boulardii being a type of yeast. And I always thought that the best role that the soil-based probiotics would fill was that they could kind of work a bit like an antimicrobial agent, like a more intelligent version of antibiotics. So they're a bit selectively killing. And that's why I always thought, well, Saccharomyces boulardii doesn't really have a place, because if we want colonizing, we want to replenish our Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium, then we'll take a Lactobacillus Bifidobacterium probiotic. And if we want to take another probiotic that's maybe a bit more SIBO safe or a bit aggressive, if somebody's trying to kill some chronic dysbiosis in the digestive system, then we'll go with the soil-based organisms. And Saccharomyces boulardii doesn't really have a place. It doesn't really fit anywhere. There are other probiotics that do all of the jobs better. But I've recently found some information that showed me that Saccharomyces boulardii actually fills a really interesting niche, and it can actually be very useful and effective probiotic for certain things. Now, I will say that it is true in most cases that Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium probiotics can still do everything that Saccharomyces boulardii can do. So I do still think, in a way, Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium probiotics, like the delactate-free probiotic and the 11-strain formula by Custom Probiotics, like Seed and like Garden of Life, I would say overall, I do think these are still better probiotic options, generally speaking. But the niche that I really think Saccharomyces boulardii can be really good at filling is we can basically use them in the short term to function like a binder for somebody that doesn't tolerate binders very well. And this is actually very common because one of the main reasons you would want to be using a binder is because of toxins. We use binders to help get toxins out of the body. One of the biggest complications that comes with toxins is constipation. And this can be to several mechanisms. It can be because toxins kill our gut bacteria, which can be constipating. It can be because toxins make our bile congested and thick and sticky, which can cause constipation. There are several different mechanisms by which toxins can trigger constipation. And obviously, if you're constipated, taking a binder, which notoriously is constipating, probably not a good idea, because there's no point binding the toxins if it's going to stop you from getting rid of them in the end. So this is where Saccharomyces boulardii can come in. So I found a couple of studies recently that I found really interesting, and they were highlighting how Saccharomyces boulardii can function like a binder. It uses some different mechanisms compared to traditional binders like activated charcoal, whereby instead of binding from that classical sense, it's more about boulardii producing certain protease compounds which can degrade toxins. So let me show you this study here, first of all, which is where they were using Saccharomyces boulardii in C. diff cases. So C. diff, if you don't know, is Clostridium difficile. And it's called difficile because it's really difficult. It's a really difficult pathogen to deal with. It causes chronic diarrhea. It can kill people because they can't maintain the hydration status in their body. It's really, really severe. It's actually the only condition for which an FMT is considered like a first-line intervention or a prescriptive modality that is actually acknowledged by mainstream medicine. So this shows you that the FMT is slowly creeping onto the scene as a modality that could work for healing certain kind of chronic or acute gut dysbiosis infection kind of problems. But in the case here of Saccharomyces boulardii, and I'll read from the study here, Saccharomyces boulardii inhibits C. diff toxin A, enteritis, so enteritis is like inflammation of the gut lining, in rats by releasing a protease which digests the toxin A molecule. So this is showing that it's working like a binder, but not because it's actually binding to the compound that's the toxin, but because it's actually breaking it down. It's kind of like digesting the toxin inside the gut, which is amazing because if it's broken down, it doesn't need to be bound because it's not a toxin anymore, which is amazing. It's really, really cool. So I don't have any more studies about this specific angle. I have seen some studies where this is also useful for things like enterotoxigenic E. coli infections. So this would basically be a similar sort of thing, but based from an E. coli type of toxin that's being produced. And this yeast can help to break this compound down, so it could be really effective. And the other place this could work is it almost can competitively inhibit against other yeasts. So if you have like some mold colonization, or if you're dealing with some Candida, having a beneficial yeast on your team can be really helpful because it's going to crowd out that microbe. And although it's not going to work like a binder necessarily, it's going to reduce the amount of those other organisms that are producing toxins. So it's overall reducing the amount of total toxins that are produced. So effectively, it's doing a kind of similar job. It's reducing overall toxic load, which is the whole point of a binder. I will say that, again, a delactate-free, 11 strain, or seed, or garden of life, these more classic types of probiotics, and you could even throw fermented foods in there like kefir and kimchi and sauerkraut. These microbes that are in here also do many of these things as well. They do crowd out dysbiotic and pathogenic microbes. Sometimes you can't do the fermented foods because of histamine intolerance, and sometimes people don't get on with these microbes very well. And the reason that I think Saccharomyces Boulardii can work really well here is you can use very low doses in like the range of like 5 to 10 billion CFUs, and they can have very profound effects, like the equivalent binding effect of like up to 200 billion CFUs of a normal Lactobacillus or Bifidobacterium probiotic. If you're struggling to take high doses of these colonizing microbes, even taking a low dose of Saccharomyces Boulardii can have the same kind of binding effect and can do a lot of that crowding out kind of effect in the gut as well. So this is me saying I was a little bit wrong about that. Does potentially have a place. Some people do need to be a bit cautious because if you have mold exposure, which is one place this can work really well, and we're going to take a look at some mycotoxin studies in a moment. But one thing you might want to be careful with is some people that have had mold exposure, their immune system can be hypersensitized to yeasts. So not only do they react to mycotoxins, they can also react to mushrooms, even medicinal mushrooms like reishi and cordyceps, and these like beneficial mushroom compounds, even the normal food mushrooms that you would eat, like those little white cap or little button mushrooms. If your body is hypersensitized to yeast, then you definitely don't want to use something like Saccharomyces Boulardii because it is a yeast. So it might not be the right time for that. Instead, use one of those other options. But now let's quickly switch over to looking at some mycotoxin evidence. So here in this first study, it shows you Saccharomyces Boulardii has been reported to remove up to 96.9% of aflatoxin in reconstituted milk. Now, I will say there are some other variables in that, and obviously we're using this in a food-based product. So I wouldn't extrapolate the same numbers, but my point in this is we have scientific evidence that proves that this microbe can basically break down or bind to certain types of mycotoxins. There isn't as much data on this as to what different types of mycotoxins it can do this with and to what extent this is effective in the gut, but you have to assume that it is effective to some extent. And the best part about having microbes in your gut versus like in a petri dish is they're working 24/7. You can keep taking Saccharomyces Boulardii every single day. You can take it on repeat, and it's just constantly doing this work. And even if that binding rate is nowhere near 96%, let's say it's like 10%, let's have a super conservative estimate. Would you be sad if you were detoxing those mold toxins 10% faster? Because I wouldn't. I think that's a really great number. If you can increase it by 10% and you maintain that for a full year, imagine how much faster you're going to heal from mycotoxin illness. So I think that one was really cool. And there's another one here. Saccharomyces Boulardii has demonstrated mycotoxin binding effects as well as the ability to reverse mycotoxin-induced injury by modulating the expression of inflammatory cytokines. So this is even cooler. This is showing that not only can it help with the mycotoxins themselves, but it can also help with modulating the immune dysregulation that happens when we're exposed to these types of compounds. So many people will know that mold illness isn't just about getting those mycotoxins out of your body. Those mycotoxins, they create histamine intolerance, mast cell activation syndrome, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. They cause autoimmune diseases. They throw your body into complete chaos. They completely disarray many different systems in your body. So this is showing that not only can this microbe help to actually get rid of that root cause compound, that molecule that's actually triggering all of these problems in the first place, but it actually helps to modulate that cascade response that happens from this exposure. So this is like a double whammy. This is showing not only is it actually fixing the problem and removing the toxic compound, it's also helping your body to cope and adjust its immune response so that it doesn't have to go into something like a histamine, mast cell, chronic inflammatory response syndrome style of response. So for me, this was really, really cool. This was the one that I read that made me think, okay, I have to make a video about this. This is too cool not to share. So there you go. It's always good to know that whatever you think you knew is probably wrong. You're probably going to learn more in the future, and you're constantly building on everything that you have learned and discovered. So don't be too afraid to let go of previous awareness or previous perspectives that you have. Healing is all about growing, and if you're going to keep growing, you're going to realize that there were some things you said in the past that were wrong, or that you had the wrong perspective on some things. So this is me saying that, and this is me presenting you with this information. So if you're dealing with any of these problems like C. diff or some type of E. coli infection, or maybe you're working on recovering from mold and you're not tolerating conventional probiotics very well, now you have another tool in your arsenal. So you go and have fun ordering your Saccharomyces Boulardii. Let me know if it's something you're taking. Let me know if it's something that's been beneficial for you in the past. I'd be really interested to hear. And that's really everything I wanted to cover in this video. So let me know if you found it interesting, and take care, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.